The morning sun blazed mercilessly over Redwood Flight Academy's pristine tarmac as Maya Pierce stepped out of her beat-up Honda Civic. The contrast was jarring, her weathered sneakers and faded jeans against the backdrop of gleaming private jets and luxury cars that belonged in a magazine spread. She gripped her canvas bag tighter, feeling the weight of every disapproving stare that followed her across the shimmering asphalt. "You lost, lady?" The security guard's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. His mirrored sunglasses reflected Maya's uncertain expression as he strutted toward her, clipboard in hand. "This isn't some public airport. We've got real pilots training here." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm here to register for flight training." She reached into her bag, pulling out carefully prepared paperwork that had taken her weeks to compile. The guard barely glanced at the forms before letting out a harsh laugh. "Right. And I'm Tom Cruise from Top Gun." He jerked his thumb toward the gate. "Registration closed months ago, sweetheart. Try the community college down the road. They might have a simulator that runs on quarters." Behind her, a group of students in pristine flight suits had gathered like vultures circling fresh roadkill. Their designer watches caught the sunlight as they whispered among themselves, pointing at Maya's worn clothing with barely concealed amusement. "Look at this," sneered a young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a flight suit that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent. Did someone's cleaning lady get lost on her way to work? The laughter that erupted felt like physical blows. Maya's cheeks burned, but she forced herself to stand straighter. She had faced worse than this. Much worse, but something about their casual cruelty made her stomach twist with a familiar rage she hadn't felt in years. "I have an appointment," Maya said quietly, her voice cutting through their mockery. "Maybe you should check your records again." The security guard's expression darkened. He made a show of flipping through his clipboard, his movements deliberately slow and condescending. "Nope, no Maya Pierce on any list. You sure you got the right place?" "This is Redwood Flight Academy, not some discount pilot school." As if summoned by the commotion, a tall instructor emerged from the main building. His uniform was so heavily decorated with badges and insignia that he looked more like a parade marshal than a flight instructor. He approached with the confident stride of someone who had never been told no in his entire privileged life. "What seems to be the problem here?" His voice carried the polished authority of old money and older prejudices. "Just some confusion, Mr. Harrison," the guard replied with a knowing smirk. "This person seems to think she belongs here." Mr. Harrison's eyes swept over Maya like she was a stain on his perfect academy. When his gaze landed on her registration papers, his lip curled in disgust. "I'm afraid there's been a mistake. Redwood Academy maintains very specific standards. We only accept candidates with appropriate backgrounds." The words hung in the air like a slap. Maya felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. Not hurt, but calculation. She had encountered this kind of institutional arrogance before, in places where the stakes were life and death rather than just wounded pride. "What exactly do you mean by appropriate backgrounds?" Maya asked, her voice deceptively calm. Mr. Harrison's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Well, for starters, our students typically arrive in something other than—" He gestured dismissively at her Honda. "That. They also tend to have references from established aviation families or substantial financial backing. This isn't a charity, Miss Pierce." The gathered students erupted in fresh waves of laughter. One of them, a cocky young man with slicked back hair, stepped forward with his phone already recording. "Oh, this is perfect," he announced to his camera. "Welcome to another episode of Reality Check with your boy Tyler. Today we've got someone who actually thinks she can afford to train at Redwood Academy. Look at this setup. I bet that bag is from Goodwill." Maya watched the red recording. Light with growing fury. Tyler panned the camera across her modest appearance, narrating her supposed failures to his audience of thousands. The comments section lit up with laughing emojis and harsh judgments from people who had never met her, but felt qualified to mock her dreams. "The audacity is unreal," Tyler continued, zooming in on her scuffed shoes, like, "Seriously, know your place, right? Some people just don't understand that not everyone gets to play with the big toys." The crowd around them grew larger, drawn by the spectacle like moths to a flame. Maya felt their stares like pinpricks against her skin, but she didn't move. Instead, she studied each face, memorizing the expressions of those who found her misery. "Entertaining?" Mr. Harrison cleared his throat importantly. "I think we've made our position clear. Miss Pierce, I suggest you pursue more realistic career options. Perhaps something in ground crew or aircraft maintenance would be more suitable for someone of your background." As Maya turned to leave, she heard Tyler address his camera one final time. And that, folks, is what happens when you aim too high without the credentials to back it up. Make sure to like and subscribe for more reality checks. Walking back to her car under the weight of their laughter and judgment, Maya's mind was already working. She had been dismissed, humiliated, and written off, exactly as she had expected. But they had made one crucial mistake in their arrogance. They had assumed they knew who she was. They had no idea what was coming. Maya spent the next 3 days researching everything she could about Redwood Flight Academy. What she discovered made her earlier treatment seem almost predictable. The academy wasn't just exclusive, it was a carefully constructed monument to nepotism and inherited privilege. She sat in her small apartment, surrounded by printouts and open laptop screens, mapping out the academy's power structure like she once mapped enemy positions. The board of directors read like a who's who of old aviation money, retired military, brass who had never seen combat, airline executives whose fathers had bought their first jobs, and wealthy hobbyists who collected pilot licenses like vintage wines. The student roster was equally telling. Most of the current trainees were children of board members sponsored by major aerospace companies or simply rich enough to treat flight training as an expensive hobby. The few scholarship students mentioned in the academy's promotional materials seemed to exist solely for photo opportunities. Her phone buzzed with a text from her old squadron mate, Jessica Martinez. "Saw the video online. That place sounds like a nightmare. You sure you want to deal with those jerks?" Maya stared at Tyler's viral video, which had already racked up over 50,000 views and countless shares. The comments section was a mix of support for her and cruel mockery that made her stomach turn. Several people had even tracked down her social media accounts, leaving harsh messages about knowing her place in reality checks. But buried among the negativity, she found something interesting. A handful of comments came from other people who had tried to enroll at Redwood and faced similar treatment. Former military pilots, experienced civilian aviators, even a few commercial airliner pilots had all been turned away for various fabricated reasons. Maya started reaching out to these people, and their stories painted a disturbing picture. Redwood didn't just prefer wealthy students, they actively worked to exclude anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of acceptable. Applications mysteriously disappeared, test scores were questioned without basis, financial aid was perpetually under review. The more she learned, the angrier she became. This wasn't just about her anymore, this was about a system designed to keep aviation an exclusive club for the privileged few. On her 4th day of research, Maya made a phone call that changed everything. General Thompson's office, came the crisp voice of a military secretary. "This is Captain Maya Pierce requesting to speak with General Thompson about a civilian matter." The brief hold felt like an eternity. When the familiar voice came on the line, Maya felt a wave of relief she hadn't expected. "Pierce, good to hear from you. How's civilian life treating you?" "Honestly, sir, it's been educational. I'm calling about a potential opportunity that might benefit both of us." 20 minutes later, Maya hung up with a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. General Thompson had been very interested in her situation, particularly when she explained Redwood's discriminatory practices and their potential impact on military recruitment. "Those academy graduates apply for our pilot programs all the time," he had said. "If they're not selecting candidates based on merit, that's a problem for all of us. Keep me posted on how this develops, Captain. You might have more support than you realize." That evening, Maya drove back to Redwood Academy. This time, she wasn't there to register. She was there to observe, to learn the patterns and routines. That would prove crucial in the days to come. She parked across the street and watched as expensive cars dropped off students for evening training sessions. The casual arrogance was visible even from a distance, the way they strutted across the tarmac like they owned it, the dismissive way they treated the ground crew, the obvious hierarchy that placed wealth above skill. Around 9 p.m., she noticed something interesting. A small group of students gathered near the main hangar, and their body language suggested they were planning something. Maya couldn't hear their conversation, but she recognized the posture of people about to cause trouble. Her instincts proved correct when she saw them pull out their phones and start live streaming. They were hunting for content, looking for someone else to humiliate for their followers' entertainment. When a young maintenance worker approached to ask them to move away from the aircraft, they immediately surrounded him with cameras, mocking his uniform and demanding to know if he actually knew how to read. Maya watched the teenager's face crumple under their assault. He was probably making minimum wage and just trying to do his job, but to these students, he was entertainment. Fresh content for their social media feeds. That was when Maya made her decision. She had planned to take weeks building her case, gathering evidence, and developing a careful strategy. But watching that kid get humiliated by the same people who had mocked her 3 days earlier, she realized that some battles couldn't wait. She pulled out her own phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she needed. The call connected on the second ring. Peterson Air Force Base, Air Traffic Control. "This is Captain Maya Pierce, identification number 7744281. I need to speak with Colonel Davidson about scheduling a demonstration flight. One moment, Captain." As Maya waited for the colonel to come on the line, she watched Tyler and his crew continue tormenting the maintenance worker. Their laughter carried across the parking lot, cruel and sharp in the evening air. "Pierce? Is that really you?" Colonel Davidson's voice was warm with genuine affection. "What can I do for you? I need to borrow an F-22 for a civilian demonstration. Nothing classified, just a standard flight pattern over the Redwood Flight Academy. I have General Thompson's preliminary approval." There was a pause that stretched just long enough to make Maya nervous. Then Colonel Davidson chuckled. "You know what, Pierce? After everything you did overseas, if you need to make a point to some civilian flight school, I think we can arrange that. When do you need it?" Maya looked across the street at the academy's spotlit buildings, at the students who thought their money made them untouchable, at the institution that had dismissed her without even checking who she really was. "Tomorrow afternoon," she said. "And Colonel, make sure air traffic control is very responsive when I request landing clearance. I have a feeling Redwood Academy is about to learn something about real aviation." Maya arrived at Redwood Academy the next morning with a different strategy. Instead of trying to register officially, she decided to test their policies more directly. She had dressed in the same casual clothes as before, but this time she carried a folder containing her military service records, flight certifications, and combat mission reports. The same security guard was on duty, and his face lit up with malicious recognition when he saw her approaching. "Well, well, look who's back for round 2, he called out, loud enough to attract attention from nearby students. "Didn't we make ourselves clear yesterday?" "I thought you might want to review my qualifications more thoroughly," Maya replied, offering him the folder. "I have extensive flight experience that might change your assessment." The guard made no move to take the documents. Instead, he crossed his arms and shook his head with exaggerated patience. "Lady, I don't care if you've got a pilot's license from a cereal box. This place has standards and you don't meet them." End of story. A small crowd had gathered again, drawn by the promise of another entertaining confrontation. Maya recognized several faces from yesterday, including Tyler, who was already positioning himself for the best camera angle. "Round 2, everyone," Tyler announced to his live stream audience. "Our persistent friend is back for more reality checks. The determination is admirable, but knowing when you're beaten is part of growing up." Mr. Harrison emerged from the building. Right on schedule, his expression already set in disapproving lines before he even reached the group. Maya noticed how he moved, like a man accustomed to having his authority accepted without question. "Miss Pierce, isn't it?" His voice carried the weary tone of someone dealing with a persistent annoyance. "I thought we had resolved this matter yesterday. I brought additional documentation," Maya said, holding up the folder. "My flight records and certifications. I think you'll find them quite comprehensive." Mr. Harrison glanced at the folder with obvious distaste. "I'm sure they're very impressive in their own way, but as I explained yesterday, Redwood Academy has very specific requirements. Our students come from established aviation families or possess substantial financial backing from recognized aerospace companies." "What about military service?" Maya asked. "Surely combat flight experience would be relevant to your training programs." The question seemed to catch him off guard for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "Military training is different. Our focus here is on civilian aviation excellence, not whatever basic flight instruction the armed forces provide." The casual dismissal of military service sent a cold fury through Maya's veins. She had watched friends die in cockpits, defending the very freedom that allowed this pompous man to run his exclusive little club. "Basic flight instruction?" Maya repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. "Don't take it personally," Mr. Harrison said with a condescending smile. "I'm sure what you learned in the military was adequate for its purposes, but civilian aviation requires a more refined approach, something beyond the capabilities of most military pilots." The students around them murmured agreement, their faces showing the same superior confidence as their instructor. One young man, wearing a flight suit worth more than most people's monthly salary, stepped forward with a smirk. "My dad always says military pilots are just glorified bus drivers," he announced to general laughter. "Point A to point B, follow orders, don't think too much. Real flying is about style, precision, and understanding that not everyone belongs in the cockpit." Tyler zoomed in on Maya's face, clearly hoping to capture the moment she broke down or lost her temper. His audience was growing by the minute, drawn by the promise of watching someone's dreams get crushed in real time. "You have to admit," Tyler said to his camera while keeping Maya in the frame, "there's something almost tragic about this level of delusion. Like, at what point do you accept reality and move on?" Maya looked around at the circle of faces surrounding her. The smug students, the dismissive instructor, the cruel security guard, and the audience of online strangers who found her humiliation entertaining. For a moment, she felt truly alone, surrounded by people who saw her as nothing more than a source of amusement. That's when she noticed movement near the Academy's flight line. A small aircraft was attempting to taxi, but something was clearly wrong with its left engine. Black smoke was beginning to pour from the cowling, and the pilot inside looked panicked. Without thinking, Maya broke from the crowd and ran toward the aircraft. Behind her, she heard Tyler narrating the scene to his audience. And now she's running toward the planes. Security's gonna love this. Maya reached the aircraft just as the pilot managed to shut down the engine. The young man inside was pale and shaking, clearly rattled by what could have been a catastrophic engine failure. "Are you okay?" Maya called through the cockpit window. The pilot nodded shakily and began the shutdown procedures. As he climbed out, Maya quickly assessed the situation. The engine fire suppression system had activated correctly, and the immediate danger was over, but she could see several things the pilot had missed in his panic. "You need to disconnect the battery," she told him calmly, "and make sure the fuel valves are completely shut off. That smoke could reignite if there's still fuel vapor." The pilot looked confused. "I thought I got everything." Maya pointed to several switches that were still in the wrong position. "Military habit. Triple check everything when there's a fire. Better safe than sorry." As the pilot corrected the issues she had identified, Maya became aware that the crowd had followed her. Tyler was still recording, but his commentary had become uncertain. The students who had been mocking her moments earlier were now watching her handle a genuine emergency with obvious competence. Mr. Harrison pushed through the group, his face flushed with anger. "What do you think you're doing? You have no authority to interfere with our aircraft or students." "I was helping prevent a potential fire," Maya replied evenly. "Your student missed several important shutdown procedures." "Our student is fully trained and certified," Mr. Harrison snapped, "unlike certain amateurs who think watching military planes makes them experts." The pilot, who had been in the aircraft, looked between Maya and Mr. Harrison with growing confusion. Actually, she was right about the switches. "I was pretty shaken up and missed the fuel valve isolation." Mr. Harrison's face darkened further. "Mr. Patterson, I think the stress of the situation has clouded your judgment. This woman has no qualifications to assess aircraft procedures, but she—" the student began. "That's enough," Mr. Harrison cut him off. He turned to Maya with barely controlled rage. "You are trespassing on private property and interfering with our training operations. Security will escort you off the premises immediately, and if you return, we will have you arrested." The security guard stepped forward with obvious pleasure. "You heard him, lady. Time to go. And if we see you back here again, it won't just be embarrassing, it'll be criminal." As Maya was physically escorted toward the gate, she heard Tyler wrapping up his live stream. Well, that was more excitement than expected. Our persistent friend tried to play hero, but ultimately got the boot anyway. Sometimes reality checks come in unexpected packages. The laughter and mockery followed her all the way to her car, but as Maya drove away from Redwood Academy for what everyone assumed would be the last time, she wasn't thinking about the humiliation or the cruel comments. She was thinking about tomorrow's demonstration flight and how satisfying it would be to watch their smug faces when they realized exactly who they had been dismissing. The war wasn't over. It had barely begun. Maya spent that evening making phone calls and sending carefully worded emails. Her years in military intelligence had taught her that information was the most powerful weapon in any conflict, and she intended to arm herself thoroughly before her next encounter with Redwood Academy. Her first call went to Captain Sarah Mitchell, an old friend from her squadron who now worked in Air Force public relations. "Maya, I heard through the grapevine that you're having some interesting encounters with civilian flight schools." Sarah said with barely contained amusement. Word travels fast in military aviation circles. Interesting is one way to put it, Maya replied. Sarah, I need a favor. Tomorrow's demonstration needs to look completely official and legitimate. Can you make sure the right people know what's happening? Already on it, Colonel Davidson briefed me this morning. We're treating this as a community outreach demonstration, showcasing Air Force capabilities to civilian aviation institutions, completely above board and thoroughly documented. Maya's second call was to her old commanding officer, General Patricia Walsh, who had always been a fierce advocate for her pilots. Pierce, I've been following your situation with great interest, the general said without preamble. These civilian academies have been problematic for military recruitment for years. They take our tax dollars through various defense contracts, then turn around and dismiss our veterans as unqualified. It's time someone reminded them where real aviation excellence comes from. I'm not looking for revenge, Ma'am, Maya said carefully. I just want fair treatment and equal opportunity. Of course you're not, General Walsh replied with a chuckle. You're looking for justice. There's a difference, and it's an important one. You have my full support, Captain. Show them what a real pilot looks like. Maya's final preparation involved something more unconventional. She had noticed during her previous visits that Redwood Academy's student body was heavily active on social media. Tyler's live streams were just the tip of the iceberg. Dozens of students regularly posted content about their training, their expensive equipment, and their general superiority over ordinary people. She created several fake social media accounts and began following their content, learning their schedules, their attitudes, and most importantly, their weaknesses. What she discovered was even worse than she had imagined. These students didn't just feel superior to outsiders. They actively hunted for people to humiliate. They had ongoing social media challenges to see who could find the most pathetic aviation wannabes to mock. They shared photos of rejected applicants, maintenance workers, and anyone else they deemed beneath their status. One particular post made Maya's blood boil. It showed the young maintenance worker from the previous evening with mocking captions about his dreams of touching real aircraft. The comments section was filled with cruel jokes and speculation about his background, his intelligence, and his worth as a human being. Maya screenshotted everything. Tomorrow wouldn't just be about her personal vindication. It would be about exposing a toxic culture that treated cruelty as entertainment. The next morning dawned clear and bright, perfect flying weather. Maya arrived at Peterson Air Force Base at 600 hours, 3 hours before her scheduled demonstration. She needed time to prep the aircraft, review her flight plan, and mentally prepare for what was coming. The F-22 Raptor waiting for her on the tarmac was a thing of beauty. 185 feet of cutting-edge aerospace engineering representing the pinnacle of American air superiority. Maya had flown this particular aircraft dozens of times in combat situations, but today felt different. Today, she would be flying not against enemy fighters, but against prejudice and arrogance. Colonel Davidson met her in the briefing room, his expression serious but supportive. Everything's arranged on our end, Pierce. Air traffic control knows you're coming and they'll grant you priority clearance. The Media Affairs Office has also been notified and they'll be monitoring social media for reactions. Thank you, sir. I won't forget this support. You better not—
Screw this up, the colonel said with a grin. Half the base wants to see these rich kids get their comeuppance. As Maya suited up in her flight gear, she felt the familiar calm that always preceded important missions. The humiliation and anger
of the past few days crystallized into cold, focused determination. She had been underestimated before by enemies who thought American women couldn't fight, by superiors who questioned her capabilities, by anyone who confused quiet confidence with weakness. Today, Redwood Flight Academy would learn the same. Lesson. At 1300 hours, Maya strapped herself into the F-22's cockpit and began her pre-flight checklist. Each switch, each system, each procedure was executed with the precision that had kept her alive through dozens of combat missions. The aircraft responded to her touch like an extension of her own body, eager to prove that pilot and machine were perfectly matched. Redwood Tower, this is Raptor 2-1 requesting clearance for demonstration flight. Maya spoke into her radio as she contacted the Academy's air traffic control. There was a long pause before the response came. Raptor 2-1.
We weren't notified of any military demonstration today.
Maya smiled inside her helmet. Please contact Peterson Air Force Base for confirmation. This is a scheduled community outreach demonstration. Another pause, followed by frantic radio chatter in the background. Maya could imagine the confusion and panic as the Academy's staff tried to figure out what was happening. Finally, a different voice came on the radio. Older, more authoritative, clearly someone senior in the Academy's hierarchy. Raptor 2-1, we need you to divert to another location. We have student training operations in progress. Negative, Redwood Tower, Maya replied calmly. This demonstration was coordinated through proper military channels and has priority clearance. Please, clear your airspace for inbound traffic. The silence that followed was telling. Maya could picture the scene on the ground. The same staff members who had dismissed her as unqualified now faced with the reality that she was piloting one of the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world. As she approached Redwood Academy's airspace, Maya allowed herself one final moment of anticipation. In a few minutes, everyone who had laughed at her, mocked her, and dismissed her capabilities would discover exactly who they had been dealing with. The irony wasn't lost on her. They had told her she wasn't qualified to touch their training aircraft. Now she was about to show them precision, flying in a machine worth more than their entire academy. Redwood Tower, Raptor 2-1 on final approach, requesting permission to land. The response, when it finally came, was barely a whisper. Raptor 2-1, cleared to land. Maya Pierce smiled as she began her descent. It was time to make an entrance. The thunderous roar of the F-22's engines shattered the peaceful afternoon at Redwood Flight Academy like a sonic sledgehammer. Students and instructors alike poured out of buildings, their faces turned skyward in shock and awe as the grey predator descended from the clouds with surgical precision. Maya had timed her approach perfectly. The Academy's VIP demonstration was in full swing, with wealthy donors, potential sponsors, and local media gathered on the main observation deck. What was supposed to be a showcase of the Academy's elite training capabilities had just been upstaged by a genuine display of aerospace supremacy. The F-22 touched down with barely a whisper of tire smoke, its landing so smooth it seemed to defy physics. Maya taxied the aircraft to a position directly in front of the main terminal, where the stunned crowd had gathered like deer caught in headlights. Through her canopy, Maya could see familiar faces in the crowd. Tyler stood frozen with his phone, hanging limply at his side, his usual smirk replaced by slack-jawed disbelief. Mr. Harrison was pushing through the crowd, his face cycling through confusion, fear, and the beginning of a terrible understanding. Maya completed her shutdown procedures with deliberate calm, savoring each moment as the reality of the situation dawned on the people below. When she finally opened the canopy and removed her helmet, letting her hair cascade free in the afternoon, the gasps from the crowd were audible even over the dying whine of the engines. She climbed down from the cockpit with practiced ease, her flight suit bearing the patches and insignia that told the story of her real qualifications. Combat mission patches, squadron indicators, and the distinctive wings of an Air Force pilot decorated her uniform like a challenge to everything Redwood Academy believed about aviation excellence. The crowd parted as she walked toward them, her boots clicking against the tarmac with military precision. At the front of the group, Mr. Harrison stood frozen, his face pale as he began to understand the magnitude of his mistake.
"Miss Pierce," he stammered, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated. There must be some misunderstanding." Maya stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he had to look up slightly to meet her eyes. When she spoke, her
voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Captain Pierce," she corrected him, "United States Air Force. And there's no misunderstanding, Mr. Harrison. You told me I wasn't qualified to train at your academy. You said military pilots only receive basic flight instruction and lack the refinement for civilian aviation. I thought you might like to see what that basic instruction actually looks like." Behind Mr. Harrison, the crowd was beginning to buzz with recognition and embarrassment. Several people were frantically checking their phones, clearly searching for information about Maya's background. Others were backing away as if proximity to the conversation might contaminate them with second-hand humiliation. Tyler, who had built his online brand around mocking people he considered beneath him, was slowly raising his phone again, but his hands were shaking, and his usual confident commentary had been reduced to stammered fragments. We didn't know," he managed to say to his camera, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is unexpected." "You didn't know because you didn't bother to ask," Maya replied, her voice carrying clearly across the silent tarmac. "You saw someone in old jeans and decided you knew everything about their qualifications. You created content mocking someone whose flight hours exceed those of everyone at this academy combined." A new voice cut through the tension. "Captain Pierce? Ma'am!" Maya turned to see a young Air Force lieutenant approaching at a quick march, accompanied by a civilian in an expensive suit who looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, Air Force Public Affairs," the young officer announced. "We've been monitoring social media coverage of today's demonstration. The response has been significant." The civilian stepped forward, extending his hand nervously. "Captain Pierce, I'm David Chen, Director of the State Aviation Commission. We need to discuss some serious concerns about this academy's practices." Maya shook his hand, noting how several academy staff members behind him had gone very pale. "What kind of concerns, Mr. Chen?" "Discriminatory admission practices, for starters. We've received multiple complaints over the years, but they've been difficult to investigate. Today's demonstration has brought those issues into sharp focus," Mr. Harrison tried to interject. "Now see here, we operate within all legal guidelines." "Do you?" Maya interrupted, pulling out her phone. "Because I've been documenting some interesting social media content from your students, content that suggests a pattern of harassment and discrimination that might violate several state and federal regulations." She held up her phone, showing screenshots of the cruel posts, the mocking videos, and the systematic targeting of people the students deemed unworthy. The crowd around them pressed closer, trying to see the evidence that was apparently damning enough to attract state oversight. Director Chen examined the screenshots with growing concern. "This is exactly the kind of behavior we've been investigating. Captain Pierce, would you be willing to provide formal testimony about your experiences here?" "Absolutely," Maya replied without hesitation. "But that's not why I came here today." She turned back to face the crowd, her voice projecting clearly across the tarmac. "I came here because I believe this academy could be something better. I wanted to contribute to pilot training, to help create opportunities for people from all backgrounds who dream of flying." Maya paused, letting her eyes sweep across the faces of students and instructors who had mocked her just days earlier. "Instead, I found an institution that values privilege over ability, that mistakes arrogance for excellence, and that treats cruelty as entertainment. The silence that followed was deafening. In the crowd, Maya could see several people recording with their phones, but the usual gleeful mockery had been replaced by an atmosphere of tension and accountability. "That changes today," Maya continued, "because as it turns out, I'm not just a pilot seeking training. I'm also an investor who's been looking for the right aviation academy to support." She reached into her flight suit and pulled out a sealed envelope, which she handed to Director Chen. "Inside that envelope, you'll find documentation of my intent to purchase a controlling interest in Redwood Flight Academy, contingent on a complete restructuring of its admission policies and leadership." The gasps from the crowd were audible this time. Mr. Harrison's face had gone from pale to ashen grey, and several board members in the VIP section were frantically whispering among themselves. "You can't just—" Mr. Harrison began, but his voice trailed off as Director Chen opened the envelope and examined its contents.
"Actually, she can," the director said after a moment. "These documents appear to be in perfect order. Captain Pierce, this is quite an impressive financial commitment." Maya allowed herself a small smile. "I believe in aviation education, Mr. Chen."
Real aviation education based on merit and passion rather than bank accounts and family connections. This academy has the potential to train the next generation of pilots. All of them, not just the privileged few. In the crowd, Tyler was slowly lowering his phone, his face slack with the realization that his cruel entertainment had just cost him everything. The other students who had participated in the mockery were beginning to understand that their actions had consequences beyond social media likes and shares. Lieutenant Rodriguez stepped forward again. "Ma'am, there are several media outlets requesting interviews. The story is already trending on multiple platforms." Maya nodded, then looked back at the crowd one final time. "I'll be happy to speak with the media. I think it's important that people understand what really happened here and what's going to change." As she walked toward the building where reporters were gathering, Maya heard Mr. Harrison's voice calling after her, desperate and pleading. "Captain Pierce, perhaps we can discuss this situation privately. I'm sure we can reach some kind of understanding." Maya stopped and turned back, her expression calm but implacable. "Mr. Harrison, I tried to discuss things privately when I applied for training. You weren't interested in understanding then. Why should I be interested in understanding now?" The question hung in the air as Maya continued toward the building, leaving behind a crowd of people who were finally beginning to understand the true cost of their prejudice and cruelty. The transformation of Redwood Flight Academy was about to begin. The media frenzy that erupted around Redwood Flight Academy in the hours following Maya's demonstration was unlike anything the institution had ever experienced. By evening, Batch Redwood Takedown was trending nationally, with Tyler's original mocking videos juxtaposed against footage of Maya climbing out of the F-22. The contrast was devastating for the Academy's reputation. Maya sat in the Academy's main conference room, now surrounded by a very different group of people than those who had dismissed her just days earlier. Director Chen was present, along with Lieutenant Rodriguez, several journalists, and a hastily assembled collection of Redwoods board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Let me make sure I understand the timeline correctly," said Rebecca Martinez, an investigative journalist from Aviation Weekly. "Captain Pierce applied for training at this academy using standard procedures. She was rejected without any review of her qualifications, mocked publicly, and told she wasn't capable of handling civilian aircraft. Is that accurate?" Maya nodded calmly. "That's correct. I was also told that military pilots only receive basic instruction and lack the refinement for civilian aviation." Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Dr. William Ashford, chairman of the board and heir to a manufacturing fortune, cleared his throat nervously. "Ms. Martinez, I think there may have been some miscommunication. Our staff
Might have been overzealous in maintaining our standards. Overzealous?
Rebecca's pen scratched across her notepad. Mr. Harrison told Captain Pierce, and I quote from the video evidence, "This isn't a charity, Miss Pierce. Our students typically arrive in something other than that," referring to her modest vehicle. How is that maintaining educational standards? The silence that followed was broken by the sound of phones buzzing around the table. Lieutenant Rodriguez glanced at his device and looked up with barely concealed satisfaction. "The Pentagon has just released a statement about Captain Pierce's service record," he announced. 3 combat tours, 47 successful missions, including several deep strike operations that remain classified. She's received the Distinguished Flying Cross, 2 air medals, and the Combat Action Medal. Maya watched the color drain from Dr. Ashford's face as the full implications hit him. The Academy hadn't just rejected a qualified pilot. They had dismissed one of the most decorated aviators of her generation. Tyler, who had been sitting silently in the corner since being compelled to attend by his parents, major Academy donors, finally spoke up with a trembling voice. "I had no idea. How were we supposed to know?" Maya turned her attention to him, her expression unforgiving. "You could have asked. Instead, you created content mocking me for your social media
Followers.
You called me pathetic and a try-hard. You filmed me without permission and broadcast my personal information to thousands of strangers." She pulled out her phone and displayed Tyler's social media analytics. "Your video mocking me has been viewed over 200,000 times. Your followers sent me threatening messages, found my home address, and left reviews on my previous employer's website calling me delusional. You turned my humiliation into entertainment and profited from it." Tyler's parents, seated beside him, looked mortified. His father, a prominent real estate developer, leaned forward desperately. "Captain Pierce, Tyler is young and made a mistake. Surely we can—" "Your son is 22 years old," Maya interrupted. "Old enough to serve in the military, old enough to be held accountable for his actions. His mistake was a deliberate choice to cause harm for personal gain." Rebecca Martinez had been taking notes throughout the exchange. "Captain Pierce, what are your plans for the Academy now that you have controlling interest?" Maya's expression softened slightly, shifting from prosecutor to visionary. "Complete restructuring. The admission process will be merit-based, with blind reviews of qualifications before any personal information is considered. We'll establish scholarship programs for veterans, minorities, and economically disadvantaged candidates. Most importantly, we'll create a culture that values excellence over exclusivity." Dr. Ashford tried one last desperate gambit. "Captain Pierce, surely we can work within the existing structure, perhaps some policy adjustments." "Dr. Ashford," Maya cut him off, her voice sharp with authority, "your existing structure is fundamentally corrupt. It's designed to exclude qualified candidates based on irrelevant social factors. That's not policy adjustment territory, that's complete overhaul territory." She stood and walked to the window, overlooking the tarmac where the F-22 still sat, its presence a stark reminder of what real aviation excellence looked like. "The aerospace industry is facing a critical pilot shortage," Maya continued, her back to the room. "We need every qualified person we can train, regardless of their background or bank account. This academy will either become part of the solution, or it will become irrelevant." Director Chen spoke up from across the table. "Captain Pierce, the State Aviation Commission is prepared to support your restructuring efforts. We've been looking for an opportunity to address these systemic issues." Maya turned back to face the room. "I appreciate that support, Mr. Chen, because there's one more thing this room needs to understand." She walked back to her seat, her movements deliberate and controlled. This isn't just about Redwood Academy. This story is going national, possibly international. Every aviation institution in the country is going to be watching how this plays out. Lieutenant Rodriguez nodded in agreement. Ma'am, I've already fielded calls from 3 other military installations about similar problems with civilian flight.
Schools, this has struck a nerve. The implications weren't lost on anyone in the room.
Redwood Academy wouldn't just be dealing with local consequences, they would become the poster child for everything wrong with elite aviation culture. Tyler's mother, a perfectly coiffed woman who clearly wasn't used to her family being on the wrong side of public opinion, spoke up with desperation in her voice. What can we do to make this right? Tyler has learned his lesson. We're prepared to make substantial donations. Mrs. Patterson, Maya interrupted, your son's lesson shouldn't come at the expense of other people's dignity. And this isn't about donations. This is about fundamental change. Maya paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the room. However, I am prepared to offer a path forward for those who genuinely want to be part of the solution. Every person in the room leaned forward slightly, sensing opportunity. Effective immediately, Mr. Harrison will be terminated along with any instructor who participated in discriminatory practices. Tyler's social media content will be scrubbed, replaced with a public apology and commitment to promoting inclusive aviation education. She looked directly at Tyler, who had gone pale again. You'll also complete 200 hours of community service at inner-city schools, teaching aviation basics to kids who've never seen an airplane up close. You want to create content, create something that builds people up instead of tearing them down. Tyler nodded frantically, clearly relieved that he was being offered any alternative to complete social destruction. Dr. Ashford, Maya continued, you and the board will have 30 days to demonstrate good faith implementation of new policies, or you'll be replaced entirely. Dr. Ashford's relief was palpable. Yes, absolutely, we'll begin immediately. Maya sat back down, her expression indicating that she was nearly finished. The most important change will be cultural. This academy will become a place where achievement matters more than inheritance, where character counts more than connections. She looked around the room one final time, meeting each person's eyes. The aviation community is smaller than you think. Word travels fast about institutions that train good pilots and treat people with respect. Redwood Academy can become known for excellence and integrity, or it can become a cautionary tale about what happens when prejudice meets accountability. Rebecca Martinez closed her notebook with satisfaction. Captain Pierce, this has been incredibly enlightening. When can we expect to see the first changes implemented? Monday morning, Maya replied without hesitation. The new admission policies go into effect immediately, and we'll begin reviewing all previously rejected applications based solely on qualifications. As the meeting broke up and people began filing out of the room, Maya remained seated, watching through the window as ground crew prepared her F-22 for departure. In a few hours, she would fly back to Peterson Air Force Base, leaving behind an institution that would never be the same. The war was almost over. Victory was within sight. 3 weeks later, Maya stood in the same conference room where she had delivered Redwood Academy's ultimatum, but the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. The space buzzed with productive energy as her new leadership team reviewed applications from candidates who represented the future of aviation, regardless of their bank accounts or family names. We've received over 800 new applications since the restructuring announcement, reported Jennifer Walsh, the Academy's new Director of Admissions. A former Air Force logistics officer, Jennifer brought both military precision and genuine passion for inclusive education to her role. 40% are from military veterans, 30% from underrepresented communities, and the remaining 30% are civilians who were previously discouraged from applying to elite programs. Maya reviewed the statistics with satisfaction. "What about our current student retention?" "Interesting development there," said Dr. Marcus Thompson, the new chief flight instructor who had replaced Mr. Harrison. A retired airline captain with 30 years of experience, he had jumped at the chance to build something meaningful. "We lost about 20% of our existing students, mostly those who were only here for social status, but the remaining 80% are actually performing better now that the focus is on competence rather than connections." The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Several board members had resigned rather than accept the new direction, taking their donations with them. Tyler's parents had initially threatened to sue before realizing that their son's documented behavior made their position untenable. 3 instructors had been terminated for refusing to abandon discriminatory practices, but for every person who left, 2 qualified professionals had stepped forward to join the revolution. "How's Tyler adapting to his community service?" Maya asked. Dr. Thompson smiled. "Actually, better than expected. Yesterday, I watched him help a 12-year-old girl from East Oakland understand how airfoil shape creates lift. She was absolutely captivated, asking questions faster than he could answer them. I think he's beginning to understand what real achievement looks like." Maya nodded approvingly. Tyler's transformation had been one of the most surprising developments. Stripped of his online platform and forced to interact with people he had previously dismissed, he was slowly discovering that inspiration created better content than humiliation. "What about our partnership applications?" Jennifer consulted her tablet. "The Air Force has officially approved us as a preferred civilian training partner. 3 major airlines have committed to recruitment programs. Most significantly, NASA has expressed interest in using our facilities for astronaut candidate screening." The irony wasn't lost on Maya. The same academy that had rejected her for lacking appropriate backgrounds was now being courted by the most prestigious aerospace organizations in the country. A knock at the door interrupted their planning session. Jennifer looked up from her tablet with a puzzled expression. "Captain Pierce?" "There's someone here to see you. She says her name is Sarah Chen and that she applied here 6 months ago." Maya's eyebrows rose with interest. "Send her in." The young woman who entered was probably in her early 20s, with the confident posture of someone accustomed to precision and discipline. She wore a simple blouse and jeans, but carried herself with the bearing of a pilot. "Captain Pierce," she said, extending her hand with a firm grip. "I wanted to thank you personally for what you've done here. Please, sit down. Tell me about your experience with Redwood." Sarah's expression tightened slightly. "I applied here last fall. I'm a second-generation Chinese-American, MIT aerospace engineering graduate, private pilot's license with instrument rating, and I'd saved up enough money for the full training program." Maya could already guess where this story was heading. "Let me guess, they found reasons to reject your application." "Oh, they were very creative," Sarah said with bitter amusement. "First, they questioned whether my flight hours were legitimate because I'd trained at a public airport instead of a private facility. Then they suggested that my engineering background might make me too analytical for intuitive flying. Finally, they told me that the program was full, even though they accepted 3 new students the following week." Dr. Thompson leaned forward with interest. "What did you do after that?" "I applied to other programs, but word travels fast in elite aviation circles. Everywhere I went, I was told that if Redwood had rejected me, there must be good reasons. I was starting to think that maybe I wasn't cut out for professional flying after all." Maya felt a familiar surge of anger. Sarah's story was probably repeated dozens of times by qualified candidates who had been systematically excluded from opportunities. "What changed your mind?" Sarah smiled for the first time since entering the room. Your demonstration flight went viral in the aviation community. When I saw you climb out of that F-22 and confront the same people who had rejected
me, I realized that the problem wasn't my qualifications. It was their prejudices.
She pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. I'd like to resubmit my application under your new system. Jennifer immediately reached for the folder. We'll process this today. Based on what you've told us, I can't imagine any legitimate reason for rejection. Maya studied Sarah's earnest expression and saw something of herself in the young woman's determination. Sarah, would you be interested in something beyond just training? What do you mean? We're looking for qualified candidates to join our instructor development program. You'd complete your advanced training while simultaneously preparing to teach the next generation of pilots. It's challenging, but it would put you at the forefront of aviation education reform. Sarah's eyes widened with possibility. You're serious? Dead serious. We need instructors who understand what it's like to face discrimination, who can relate to students from diverse backgrounds, and who have the technical competence to maintain our new standards. Maya stood and walked to the window again, looking out at the tarmac where a diverse group of students was conducting pre-flight inspections under Dr. Thompson's guidance. Among them was Tyler, no longer filming mockery, but genuinely helping.
A veteran student, understand engine systems. Sarah, what you experienced here was wrong, but it wasn't unique.
There are hundreds of qualified people who've been shut out of aviation careers because they didn't fit someone's narrow definition of acceptability. We're not just changing one academy, we're proving that excellence comes from merit, not privilege. She turned back to face the group. Every student we train, every instructor we develop, every partnership we build sends a message to the entire industry. That message is simple. Aviation belongs to everyone who has the skill and passion to fly. Dr. Thompson nodded enthusiastically. Sarah, if you're interested in the instructor program, I'd be happy to discuss the details. We're building something special here. As Sarah and Dr. Thompson moved to a corner of the room to discuss the program specifics, Maya's phone buzzed with a text message from General Walsh. Saw the latest news coverage. Pentagon is impressed with Redwood's transformation. Keep up the good work, Captain. Maya smiled as she typed back. Mission accomplished, ma'am. But this is just the beginning. Jennifer approached with her tablet. Captain Pierce, we have a media request from 60 Minutes. They want to do a follow-up story on the Academy's transformation and its impact on the aviation industry. Maya considered the request carefully. The national attention had been crucial for driving change, but she was also aware that sustained progress required moving beyond sensation and toward substance. Set it up, she decided, but I want the focus to be on our students and instructors, not on me. This story isn't about revenge, it's about redemption and the future of aviation education. As the afternoon meeting concluded and people began to disperse, Maya remained in the conference room, watching the activity on the tarmac below. In just 3 weeks, Redwood Academy had transformed from an exclusive club for the privileged into a genuine center of aviation excellence. The change wasn't just visible in the demographics of the students, though that was certainly dramatic. It was evident in the energy, the enthusiasm, and the sense of purpose that now permeated every aspect of the Academy's operations. Maya thought about her journey from that first humiliating day to this moment of institutional transformation. The personal vindication had been satisfying, but the broader impact was infinitely more meaningful. She had set out to prove that she belonged in their cockpits. Instead, she had proven that their cockpits belonged to everyone with the courage to reach for the sky. The revolution was complete. The real work was just beginning. 6 months after the F-22 demonstration that changed everything, Maya Pierce stood before a packed auditorium at the Redwood Flight Academy's first graduation ceremony under new management. The faces looking back at her represented a transformation that had rippled far beyond the academy's walls. In the front row sat Lieutenant Marcus Johnson, a triple amputee Iraq veteran who had been told his disabilities made him unsuitable for civilian aviation. Beside him was Maria Gonzalez, a former farm worker's daughter who had dreamed of flying since childhood, but never imagined she could afford the training. Next to her was David Kim, a former aerospace engineer who had been laid off at 45 and told he was too old to start a flying career. These weren't the trust fund babies and connected elites who had once filled these seats. These were people who had earned their wings through determination, skill, and an unshakable belief that merit mattered more than money. When I first applied to this academy, Maya began, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed auditorium. I was told I didn't belong here. I was dismissed without consideration, mocked for my appearance, and informed that military training was inadequate for civilian aviation excellence. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter passed through the audience. Many of them had seen the viral videos from that day, but hearing Maya tell the story in person carried additional weight. Today, I'm proud to present the most qualified graduating class in Redwood Academy's history. These pilots have achieved the highest test scores, the best safety records, and the most diverse range of aviation skills we've ever documented. The applause that erupted was thunderous. In the balcony, Maya could see representatives from major airlines, aerospace companies, and military recruiting offices. Word had spread throughout the industry about Redwood's transformation, and everyone wanted access to the Academy's new breed of pilots. Tyler Patterson sat in the middle section, no longer the arrogant influencer who had filmed mockery for social media clicks. 6 months of community service and genuine interaction with diverse aviation enthusiasts had fundamentally changed his perspective. His latest social media content focused on highlighting underrepresented pilots and promoting aviation accessibility. His follower count had actually increased as people responded to his authentic transformation. The changes we've implemented here aren't just about fairness, Maya continued. They're about recognizing that the aviation industry needs every qualified person we can train. The pilot shortage facing our country won't be solved by excluding people based on irrelevant criteria. It will be solved by embracing talent wherever we find it. In the VIP section, Dr. Ashford shifted uncomfortably. The board chairman had survived the initial purge by demonstrating genuine commitment to change, but his transformation had been more reluctant than authentic. Maya had kept him in place as a reminder that even the most entrenched prejudices could be overcome with sufficient pressure and oversight. Sarah Chen, now 6 months into her instructor development program, sat with the faculty section. Her technical expertise and passion for inclusive education had made her one of the Academy's most popular instructors. More importantly, her presence sent a message to every student that someone who looked like them could succeed at the highest levels. "I want to share something with you," Maya said, her tone becoming more personal. "Last week I received a letter from a 10-year-old girl in Detroit. She had seen news coverage of our academy and wanted to know if girls from poor families could really become pilots." Maya paused, letting the words sink in. "I wrote back and told her that the sky doesn't care about your bank account, your last name, or where you came from. It only cares about your skill, your preparation, and your determination to earn your place among the clouds." The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. That little girl represents the future of aviation. She represents every child who has looked up at an airplane and wondered if they could ever be the one in control. Because of what we've built here, the answer is yes, if they're willing to work for it. Maya gestured toward the graduating class. These pilots will go on to fly for major airlines, serve in the military, work for aerospace companies, and start their own aviation businesses. But more importantly, they'll serve as proof that excellence isn't inherited, it's earned. The ceremony continued with individual recognitions and awards. Lieutenant Johnson received the Distinguished Achievement Award for overcoming exceptional challenges. Maria Gonzalez was recognized for the highest academic performance in the Academy's history. David Kim received the Leadership Award for mentoring younger students, despite being older than most of his classmates. As each graduate crossed the stage to receive their certification, Maya reflected on the broader impact of Redwood's transformation. 3 other elite flight academies had voluntarily reformed their admission policies rather than face similar scrutiny. The Air Force had used Redwood as a model for improving diversity in their pilot recruitment programs. Several major airlines had adopted blind resume screening to reduce unconscious bias in their hiring processes. The ripple effects extended beyond aviation. Business schools were examining their own admission practices. Elite universities were reviewing their legacy admission policies. The concept that merit should triumph over privilege was gaining traction across multiple industries. After the ceremony, Maya found herself surrounded by graduates, families, and industry representatives. The conversations buzzed with excitement about job placements, advanced training opportunities, and the bright
futures that stretched ahead.
"Captain Pierce?" A familiar voice called from behind her. Maya turned to see Mr. Harrison, the former instructor who had been terminated 6 months earlier. He looked older, humbler, and significantly less arrogant than the man who had once dismissed her capabilities. "Mr. Harrison," Maya acknowledged neutrally.
"I wanted to apologize," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What I did to you, what I said, was inexcusable. I let my prejudices blind me to your qualifications, and I treated you with disrespect that no one deserves." Maya studied
his face, looking for signs of genuine remorse or calculated performance. What she saw was a man who had genuinely grappled with his failures and emerged changed. "I appreciate your apology," Maya said carefully, "but the person you really need to make amends to is yourself. You need to understand why you made those choices and ensure you never make them again." Mr. Harrison nodded solemnly. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about that. I realized that I was so invested in maintaining an exclusive system that I lost sight of what aviation education is supposed to accomplish, which is creating safe, skilled pilots who can serve the industry and the public," he replied without hesitation. "Everything else, the social status, the networking, the exclusivity, was just distraction from that core mission." Maya felt a surprising sense of satisfaction at his response. True change required people to understand not just what they had done wrong, but why they had done it wrong. "Mr. Harrison, if you're serious about making amends, there are other aviation institutions that could benefit from someone who understands the cost of discriminatory practices. Someone who could help them avoid the mistakes that Redwood made." His eyes widened with possibility. "You'd recommend me for that kind of position?" "I'd recommend your experience," Maya clarified. "What you do with that recommendation would be up to you." As the evening wound down and the last of the guests departed, Maya found herself alone on the tarmac where everything had begun. The same F-22 that had announced her arrival 6 months earlier was parked nearby, ready to take her back to Peterson Air Force Base. But this time, she wasn't leaving behind an institution that had rejected her. She was leaving behind a place that had been transformed into everything she had hoped it could become. Her phone buzzed with a text from the 10-year-old girl in Detroit. "Captain Pierce, I started saving money for flying lessons. My mum says, if I work hard enough, maybe I can come to your school someday." Maya smiled as she typed back. Keep saving and keep dreaming. By the time you're ready, there will be a place for you here. As she walked toward the F-22 for her final departure from Redwood Academy, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had come here seeking training and found prejudice. She had faced humiliation and responded with determination. She had been dismissed as unqualified and proven herself through action rather than argument, but most importantly, she had transformed a symbol of exclusivity into a beacon of opportunity. Climbing into the familiar cockpit, Maya
ran through her pre-flight checklist one last time at Redwood.
Tomorrow she would return to her regular Air Force duties, secure in the knowledge that her civilian mission was complete. The engines spooled up with their characteristic whine, and Maya taxied toward the runway for takeoff. As the Academist fell away beneath her wings, she thought about all the future pilots who would train there. People who would never face the discrimination she had encountered because she had made it impossible for such prejudice to survive. The sky stretched endlessly above her, vast and welcoming and indifferent to human prejudices. It was exactly as it should be. A place where excellence was the only currency that mattered, where dreams took flight regardless of their origin, and where the horizon belonged to anyone brave enough to chase it. Maya Pierce had set out to prove she belonged in their cockpits. In the end, she had proven that the cockpits belonged to everyone willing to earn their wings. The transformation was complete. The legacy would endure forever. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world. Have you ever faced discrimination or been underestimated because of how you looked or where you came from? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might inspire our next feature. For more incredible stories of ordinary people achieving extraordinary things, check out our playlist of real-life victories and don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss an update.